Canada has its share of historical mysteries. These aren't campfire stories or local legends. They are documented cases backed by RCMP files, military logs, and government archives. In each of these incidents, investigators had physical evidence, but they still came up empty. Here are four of them. Case 1. The Mad Trapper of Rat River, 1931 to 1932. In July 1931, a man arrived by riverboat in the Northwest Territories. He built a cabin near the Rat River and refused to speak to anyone. He gave his name as Albert Johnson, bought no trapping license, and offered no account of where he came from. On December 31st, two RCMP officers arrived to look into a dispute about Indigenous trapping lines. Johnson refused to open the door. The officers returned later with a warrant and an axe. Johnson shot through the door, critically wounding one of them. The manhunt that followed lasted 48 days. It covered hundreds of frozen square kilometers of subarctic terrain, with temperatures dropping below minus 40 degrees. The RCMP eventually flew in Wap May, a decorated World War I flying ace. It was the first time Canadian law enforcement used an aircraft to track a fugitive. Johnson should have been easy to find, but he wasn't. He scaled an ice-covered cliff in a blizzard in pitch darkness. He walked in caribou tracks to confuse the tracking dogs. Members of the posse reported that he never built a campfire, never pitched a tent, and showed no apparent need to sleep. In temperatures that could kill an unprepared traveler in hours, he was covering ground that would exhaust trained soldiers. He also never spoke. When RCMP Constable Edgar Millen approached the ridge, Johnson shot him dead. Witnesses said the only sound Johnson made was laughter. On February 17, 1932, a military and police unit finally cornered him on a frozen riverbed in the Yukon. He kept firing until he was fatally shot. When officers searched his body, they found gold dental work and $2,410 in cash. That is the equivalent of roughly $54,000 today. Whatever his story was, he was not a desperate drifter living hand to mouth. The mystery did not end with his death. In 2007, researchers exhumed Johnson's remains for DNA and isotope testing. The results suggested he spent his childhood either in the American Midwest or in Scandinavia. More recently, advances in genetic genealogy linked his DNA to descendants of a Swedish couple. Even with modern technology, no one can say with certainty who Albert Johnson really was. The RCMP case file remains open. Case 2. Granger Taylor, 1980. Granger Taylor grew up in Duncan, a small town on Vancouver Island. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade, but he was a remarkably gifted mechanic. He built a vintage steam locomotive from scratch, then restored a crashed World War II fighter plane that professional mechanics had written off as scrap. In the late 1970s, Taylor became obsessed with how spacecraft propelled themselves. In his family backyard, he built a full-scale model of a UFO using 2 television satellite dishes. He insulated the interior and moved in a wood-burning stove, a couch, and a workbench. He spent months inside staring at the ceiling. On November 29, 1980, a major storm knocked out power across Vancouver Island. Taylor drove to a local diner, ate dinner, got into his pickup truck, and drove away. He was never seen alive again. The next morning, his parents found a note left in the model UFO. It read, "Dear Mother and Father, I have embarked on a voyage aboard an alien spaceship, as the recurring dreams assured me a 42-year mission to explore the vast universe is about to happen. I leave all my possessions to you." Days before his disappearance, Taylor had quietly altered his will. He crossed out the word funeral and wrote departure in its place. The RCMP searched for 6 years. In 1986, forestry workers on Mount Prevost found a blast site. Inside, they discovered fragments of a truck chassis matching Taylor's vehicle identification number, along with degraded human bone fragments. The coroner ruled that Taylor died in an explosion, concluding he used commercial dynamite to blow up his truck. The physical evidence points to a tragic suicide, but the absolute lack of a clear motive leaves a lingering question. Those who knew him still wonder if he truly expected to die, or if he genuinely believed he was going somewhere else. Case 3. U.S. Military Transport C-54, 1950. On January 26, 1950, a Douglas C-54 Skymaster took off from Anchorage, Alaska, bound for Montana. On board were 44 people, including military personnel, a pregnant woman, and her young child. The flight route crossed some of the most remote wilderness in the Yukon. About 2 hours into the trip, the crew radioed a routine position report near Snag, a tiny outpost. Snag still hosts the record for the coldest temperature ever recorded in North America, minus 63 degrees Celsius. The pilot reported some turbulence and ice building up on the wings, but nothing unusual for a northern winter flight. He told controllers they would check in again at the next relay point in 30 minutes. That call never came. The search that followed was called Operation Mike. At its peak, 85 military aircraft searched more than 427,000 square kilometers of Yukon wilderness. Conditions were so harsh that 4 of the search planes crashed during the operation. Despite weeks of searching, investigators found absolutely nothing. There was no wreckage, no oil slicks on the frozen lakes, no broken treetops, and no burn marks. They never even picked up an emergency radio signal. The search was eventually called off so military resources could be redirected elsewhere. The families of those on board received death certificates, and the effort never resumed. Today, researchers maintain records of more than 500 confirmed aircraft wreck sites across the Yukon. Every single one of them has been mapped and visited. The missing C-54 is not among them. Decades of satellite imagery, aerial surveys, and summer expeditions have failed to find a single trace of the aircraft. More than 75 years later, a 30-ton military transport carrying 44 people remains completely missing. It is one of Canada's most enduring aviation mysteries. Case 4. The Halifax Citadel Doppelganger Reports. Ongoing. The Halifax Citadel is a 19th century star-shaped fort overlooking Halifax Harbour. Parks Canada has operated it as a National Historic Site for decades. Because it is a federal property, staff keep detailed logs of all incidents, patrols, and daily activities. Buried in those records are reports that are difficult to explain. Over the years, multiple staff members have reported seeing what appeared to be their co-workers in places those people could not possibly have been. One report came from a night watchman patrolling the underground gunpowder magazines. These stone chambers sit beneath the fort, with walls thick enough to block out almost all light and sound. As the watchman moved through a corridor, his flashlight caught what looked like another security guard standing at the far end with his back turned. The watchman called out to him by name but got no response. He stepped around a pillar to adjust his radio, and when he looked back, the corridor was empty. The watchman immediately radioed the front gate. The guard he had just seen was actually sitting in the main guardhouse on the completely opposite side of the fort. According to the checkpoint logs, that guard had not left his post all night. Over the years, reenactors, site managers, and Parks Canada employees have filed dozens of similar reports. The details vary, but the pattern remains consistent. Someone briefly sees a co-worker in uniform, exchanges a nod, and later discovers that person was somewhere else entirely. These are not stories passed around a break room. They are accounts recorded in official security logs and daily journals by government employees. Some staff members have become so unsettled by these experiences that they refuse to patrol certain parts of the fort alone at night. 4 cases. 1 open RCMP file from 1932. 1 coroner's ruling that explains how a man died but not why. 1 heavy transport aircraft that search teams could not locate. And decades of workplace incident reports from a federal historic site. Which one of these stood out to you? If you have a theory, leave it in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more cases like these. I'm Kevin, and this is Know Your Deets. Thanks for watching.